We need to refocus on what's going on in Ukraine. There is perhaps quite a big political development taking place, one that could boost Russia's military power. Also, something very big has happened in the last couple of days, as yet unconfirmed, but it looks like a Russian drone might have landed in Romania. That is NATO territory. So all the more reason for us once again to get Colonel Richard Kemp, former British Army commander, onto our programme. Now, Richard, welcome back. I've been watching your output and your writings on this over the course of the last 4 months as Ukraine launched their spring offensive, and we keep getting a few optimistic reports here and there. But in truth, 4 months into this, with vast casualties, it isn't going that well for Ukraine, is it?
Unfortunately, it's not, no. Unfortunately, the Ukrainians have not succeeded in really breaking through even the first line of the Russian defences. And once you get through that first line, there are then huge miles and miles and miles of further defences to fight through. It's not a very easy thing at all. And the reality is that the Ukrainians don't have the capabilities that we would hopefully have if we were fighting a similar war. And above all capabilities, I think they lack air power, and we've failed to provide air power to them. And it's very difficult to counter this kind of defence without any air power and without enough tanks, infantry soldiers, and I think above all without enough artillery. So it's a really tough task. That they are fighting hard, and they've made some advances, but very, very limited.
No. Well, many people, Richard, have drawn comparisons with the Great War. Trenches, barbed wire, artillery fire, infantry advances over open ground, huge casualties when anybody attacks. But you in the Telegraph today were suggesting that with Kim Jong-un meeting Putin and potentially giving him a huge supply of weapons, albeit somewhat out of date, but a huge supply of weapons, you were almost drawing a comparison with what happened in 1918 when the Germans launched this massive attack against the Allies and almost won the First World War.
Yeah, and the Germans basically bled the Allies dry on the front line for a long period of time. And while they were doing that, they were accumulating huge amounts of combat power so they could strike through the line and break through and defeat the Allies, which they succeeded to some extent. It was called the Kaiserschlacht in 1918. And it basically took more territory than had been taken by either side in the previous 4 years of the war. And I think that's what Russia has in mind. Russia is currently, I believe, is trying to get Ukraine to exhaust its Western-supplied, Western-equipped maneuver forces, tanks, artillery, infantry soldiers, everything they've got, to exhaust them on the what's called the Surovikin line, which is the main defensive line in Ukraine. And once they've done that, I would imagine that Putin will wind up to launch an offensive back against Ukraine. But in order to do so, he needs a lot more artillery, tanks and other weapons than he's got now. And North Korea is an ideal place to find that, beyond what he can manufacture himself.
Final thought, Richard, but potentially very important one. A drone that landed and exploded in Romania a couple of days ago. It has not yet been confirmed that it was a Russian drone, but the suspicions are building that it was. That would be a Russian missile onto NATO territory. History is littered with horrible outbreaks of war that happen through accidents. Could this possibly be one of those?
Yeah, of course, we've seen this before. Earlier in the war, we saw a Russian, well, in fact, it turned out to be a Ukrainian air defense missile that landed in Poland. It was originally thought to be a Russian missile. And there was a lot of panic then about this is going to lead to NATO coming in. I don't think it will. I think we'll probably find out if this is a Russian drone. We'll probably find out this was an accident. It wasn't an intentional attack on a NATO country. And it will be calmed down after that. Of course, it's very serious. And any kind of firing of munitions at a NATO country has to be taken seriously. But I suspect that calmer heads will prevail than those who might think, well, immediately we must unleash something against Russia.
Well, some reassurance there at least. Colonel Kemp, thank you once again for giving us that update.